Landslides, road collapses, earthquakes. Tell us about Alaska: The Last Frontier, this show that you just finished filming.
Jane Kilcher from Alaska: The Last Frontier has faced many struggles in the harsh Alaskan wilderness. However, her sudden divorce from Lee Kilcher left fans shocked and searching for answers. The real reasons remained a mystery until now. Would you like to know what really happened? Join us as we uncover Jane's untold story and challenges what you should know about Alaska: The Last Frontier. Before we unveil what happened to Jane, it's important to know the kind of family she got herself into. Alaska: The Last Frontier is an American reality television series that captivated audiences for over a decade, airing on the Discovery Channel from December 29, 2011 to November 13, 2022. The show provided a rare and fascinating glimpse into the lives of the Kilcher family, a resilient and self-sufficient clan living off the land in the rugged wilderness of Alaska. The Kilchers are descendants of Swiss immigrants and Alaskan pioneers Yule and Ruth Kilcher, who established their homestead over 80 years ago. Located approximately 11 miles outside the town of Homer, the homestead has been passed down through generations, becoming not just a place to live but a way of life deeply rooted in survival and tradition. Unlike many modern families, the Kilchers have chosen to embrace a lifestyle that rejects many conveniences of the contemporary world. They live without modern heating and instead rely on their own skills to sustain themselves: hunting, fishing, farming, and cautious preparation for Alaska's brutal winters are at the heart of their daily existence. One particularly well-known member of the Kilcher family is singer-songwriter Jewel, a globally recognized music artist. Kilcher, one of the central figures in the show, is Jewel's father, which has added another layer of interest to the family's story. Show that you just finished filming. My family was discovered accidentally. They are Discovery. Alaska is a pretty hot topic. You guys have probably all seen. Jewel shares how her family was discovered for the show. Jewel herself has made appearances on the show, reconnecting with her roots and sharing moments with her family in the Alaskan wilderness. Apart from Jewel, another female that captivated the audience is Jane, Lee's wife. Now let's unveil the qualities that endeared her to the audience. Amazing details about Jane Kilcher. Jane Kilcher was more than just another reality TV persona. She was the cornerstone of countless unforgettable moments on Alaska: The Last Frontier. Whether skillfully casting her line for fish or standing firm during family discussions, Jane's authenticity was always apparent. She was the ally you'd want alongside you if ever lost in the Alaskan wilderness. Because she was resilient, humorous, and compassionate, she emerged as a beacon for viewers navigating the trials of homesteading life. Although Jane wasn't born into the renowned Kilt family, she swiftly became an essential member of their Alaskan narrative upon joining Alaska: The Last Frontier. To audiences, she was not merely Lee Kilcher's spouse, she was a woman thriving in one of Earth's most challenging climates, showcasing her unique flair. Growing up close to the Kilcher homestead in the quaint town of Homer, Alaska, she diverged from her kin, specializing in agriculture and hunting by becoming an expert fisherwoman. Her early life near the coast endowed her with unparalleled skills. She could reel in fish when others failed, and she certainly showcased that talent on the show. Jane frequently led the charge in supplying fresh fish for the family, an essential resource in the harsh Alaskan yonder. Watching her pull in huge salmon or deftly navigate frigid waters was truly captivating. However, Jane's contribution extended beyond fishing. She provided a much-needed equilibrium amid the often serious and stoic Kilcher men. Her humor and sharp wit brought levity to the atmosphere, delighting viewers as she teased others or shared jokes during high-stress moments. She had a unique ability to connect with the audience in a genuine way, and she wasn't hesitant to reveal her vulnerable side, openly admitting when she felt scared or overwhelmed, a rare quality in the tough realm of Alaskan survival. Jane also served as a link between the contemporary world and the Kilcher lifestyle. Having spent part of her life away from the homestead, she introduced a fresh viewpoint to the show. Although she wasn't born into this way of life, she fully embraced it, demonstrating that you don't need generations of homesteading knowledge to succeed in the wilderness. This relatability endeared her to fans, yet Jane's journey hasn't been all smooth sailing. Like Alaska's unpredictable weather, her path has been filled with both bright days and storms, from gossip about family disputes to deeply personal challenges. Jane's off-screen life often seemed just as dramatic as what the cameras portrayed. Over time, she grew more protective of her personal life, frequently voicing her irritation at being seen solely as Lee's spouse or the fisherwoman, believing there was much more to her narrative off-camera. She is a fiercely independent woman, a devoted mother to her daughter Piper, and someone who cherishes her privacy despite being in the spotlight. Just when you thought you understood her story, 2003 introduced a twist. No one anticipated her shocking divorce from Lee. So How did Jane transition from being a cherished figure in the Alaskan frontier to facing some of life's greatest trials in the public eye? Jane encounters challenges because of her role. It's not as straightforward as merely living the dream on a reality TV show. Like many small screen stars, Jane's narrative took unforeseen turns. Some were pleasant while others were quite challenging from the outset. Jane emerged as a prominent figure on Alaska: The Last Frontier, but as the series gained fame, so did scrutiny of her personal life, leading to complications. Initially, Jane was comfortable with her depiction as a fisherwoman. It accurately reflected her expertise in fishing. However, as time passed, she began to feel constrained. Jane was more than just a skilled angler. She was an independent, multi-layered individual. Unfortunately, the show often failed to showcase these various aspects, rendering her character somewhat flat and overshadowed by the Kilcher men and the homestead's drama. Jane wasn't solely defined by her fishing. She was a mother, a wife, and had much more to contribute than what aired. She has openly shared her dissatisfaction regarding her portrayal. The stereotype of the fisherwoman lingered, and Jane found it frustrating. She believed the show's editing choices didn't accurately reflect her, omitting her struggles, critical choices, and personal development that occurred away from the spotlight. While she was more than a fisherwoman, that was the image that frequently prevailed in the eyes of everyone. Thus, let's examine how Jane Kilcher's character became somewhat lost in the mix on Alaska: The Last Frontier. Largely due to the family's dynamics and the show's inclination to spotlight certain individuals over others, the Kilcher family is as large and diverse as the vast land of Alaska itself. At the head of the family is Atsuts Kilcher, a tough and experienced man who has lived through many challenges. His son Otsley Kilcher is quite different. He is adventurous, rebellious, and always seeking excitement, yet he also has a strong love for the land. Jane, Atsley's wife, at first seemed like the perfect balance to the serious and rugged Kilt men. She was strong, skilled, and grounded, which made her an important part of the family. However, as time passed, her role in the family and on the show began to change. Although Jane had many strengths, she often found herself in the background of the show. Alaska: The Last Frontier was not centered around the women of the Kilcher family. It focused mainly on the tough, rugged men who braved the harsh conditions of Alaska. Ots and Otsley were constantly in the spotlight, facing challenges, surviving in the wilderness, and testing their limits. Their struggles were at the heart of the show's drama, making them the main focus. Jane, on the other hand, was often placed in a supporting role, while the men were shown battling extreme weather and taking on dangerous tasks. Jane's contributions were sometimes downplayed. Her skills and challenges were rarely given the same attention. Instead, she was often labeled as just the fisherwoman, reducing her role to one aspect of survival rather than showing the full range of her abilities. The show's editing also played a part in this. The struggles, emotions, and achievements of the men were highlighted with intensity, making their experiences seem larger than life. Meanwhile, Jane's challenges and victories were often treated as minor or not given the same dramatic focus. This created an uneven portrayal where the men were seen as the brave fighters against nature, while Jane's role seemed less significant in comparison. Lee, Jane's husband, was a complex character both on and off the screen. On the show, he was portrayed as fearless and adventurous, always willing to take risks in the wild. As the son of Ats Kilcher, he had a strong connection to the land but often clashed with the traditional ways of his family. He was seen as a free spirit, constantly struggling between his wild nature and his responsibilities. His journey was a key part of the show's storyline, filled with personal battles and emotional moments. However, outside the show, their relationship had another side that was not always shown to the audience. There was more to their story than what was captured on camera. Their struggles, personal lives, and the depth of their connection were not always fully explored in the series, leaving viewers with only part of the picture. While Otsley was shown as a man facing inner conflicts and dangerous situations, the deeper aspects of his relationship with Jane remained more private. Like any couple, Otsley and Jane Kilcher experienced their fair share of ups and downs. However, throughout the show, it often felt as if Otsley was not as engaged in Jane's story as he could have been. His personal struggles, daring adventures, and emotional battles frequently took center stage, leaving Jane's journey in the shadows while the audience saw Otsley facing grizzly bears, navigating the wilderness, and confronting his past. Jane was quietly holding everything together. She was not just a wife, she was a mother, a homesteader, and an important part of the family's survival, yet the show rarely showcased the quiet strength she brought to their lives. While Otsley was off taking on dangerous challenges or dealing with his inner demons. Jane was at home managing the household, making sure the family's needs were met and contributing in ways that often went unnoticed. She played a crucial role in keeping everything running smoothly, but because her struggles weren't as dramatic or action-packed, they didn't get the same level of attention. The show's editing choices clearly favored the larger-than-life personalities of the Kilcher men, emphasizing their intense emotional journeys. Viewers got a deep look into Lee's battles as well as those of his father's guilt. While Jane's experiences often felt like an afterthought, she was there, she was important, but she wasn't always given the recognition she truly deserved. That's not to say Jane didn't have her own moments to shine. She had an undeniable presence and was a strong character in her own right. The problem wasn't her, it was that the show didn't always give her enough airtime or the appreciation she deserved. Despite her vital contributions, she was often portrayed as just a supporting player in the broader story of the Kilcher men. Speculations about family controversies. As time went on, speculation about tensions within the family began to grow. On the surface, the Kilchers appeared to be a close-knit family, but behind the scenes there were whispers of disagreements and strained relationships. Rumors surfaced about Jane clashing with certain family members, adding to the ongoing drama that surrounded the show. Living under public scrutiny meant that every small issue could be exaggerated, and before long, headlines began to suggest that not everything was as harmonious as it seemed. Reports claimed that Jane had conflicts with some of the other Kilcher relatives, further fueling the narrative of family drama that surrounded Alaska: The Last Frontier. However, here's the surprising twist: despite all the speculation and criticism, Jane continued to stand strong. While the focus remained on the Kilcher men and their challenges, she kept proving her worth in quieter, more consistent ways. Even if she wasn't always in the spotlight, those who paid attention knew that Jane played an essential role in keeping everything together. She might not have been given the same level of attention, but her presence was undeniable. Her story may not have been told as loudly as Lee's, but it was just as important. Jane eventually found the support she deserved. While the show didn't always tell her full story, those who followed her on social media saw a completely different side of her. They saw the real Jane, the woman who laughed with her children, loved her family deeply, and faced struggles that were never shown on television. Over time, the initial criticism she received began to shift. Fans started realizing that reality TV only captures a small part of a person's life, often leaving out the most important details. Instead of judging her based on the limited portrayal they saw on Alaska: The Last Frontier, people began rooting for the real Jane, the one who was more than just a supporting character in someone else's journey. Through all the ups and downs, Jane held her head high. She found a way to balance her role on the show while also recognizing the frustrations that came with it. More importantly, she built a life beyond the cameras, a life that was not controlled by editing stereotypes or the expectations of reality TV. She refused to let the way she was portrayed define her. Instead of being discouraged by the public's perception, she turned it into motivation. She remained true to herself, showing fans a side of her that had never been fully captured on screen. She didn't let the limitations of the show hold her back. Instead, she used them as fuel to carve her own path and prove that she was much more than just Jane the fisherwoman. At first, Jane was simply seen as the woman who caught fish on Alaska: The Last Frontier, but over time she became something much greater. She became a symbol of resilience, a woman who refused to be misrepresented, and someone who fought to be seen for who she truly was. Her journey was not just about survival in the wilderness, it was about standing up for herself, breaking free from the way others wanted to define her, and proving that strength comes in many different forms. However, the true test of her strength came when life through an unexpected and devastating challenge her way at Lee's near-fatal accident. The same man who had been seen time and time again surviving the harsh conditions of Alaska, pushing himself to the limit and facing nature's toughest challenges, suddenly found himself in a real-life battle for survival. It was a moment that changed everything, a test of endurance that no one had seen coming. While Otsley had always been known for his adventurous spirit and fearless nature, this time he wasn't just fighting the wilderness, he was fighting for his life, struggling with their challenges in the spotlight. In 2015, while hiking with a friend, Otsley suffered a terrifying accident that changed everything. He took a brutal fall off a steep cliff, a fall so severe that it left him with multiple broken bones. His arm, leg, ribs, and who knows what else were shattered upon impact. It wasn't just a minor injury, it was the kind of accident that could have ended in tragedy. For a while things looked incredibly Grim. The road to recovery was long and grueling, requiring multiple surgeries, extensive rehabilitation, and a level of endurance that would test even the toughest person. As anyone who has ever watched a loved one go through something like this knows, a traumatic injury doesn't just affect the person who gets hurt, it affects everyone around them. Relationships, daily routines, and emotions get turned upside down. Life as they knew it changed in an instant, but Jane didn't hesitate when it came to stepping up. She became Atsley's rock during his recovery, offering her unwavering support while still keeping things together at home. She managed the household, cared for her family, and held everything down while Atsley focused on healing. This was when Jane's true strength became undeniable. It wasn't about dramatic high-stakes survival in the wilderness, it wasn't about adrenaline-fueled battles against nature. Her strength was in the quiet, steady determination she showed when her husband needed her the most. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. However, as Atsley faced the long road to recovery, the pressure on their marriage began to build. The physical injuries were one thing, but the emotional toll was another battle entirely. The accident had changed their lives, and with such a massive shift came inevitable stress. As time went on, whispers about trouble in their marriage grew louder. People speculated about whether the Kilcher partnership, once seen as solid and unshakable, was beginning to crack. Under the pressure, some believed Jane was feeling increasingly isolated, carrying the weight of responsibility, while Atsley wrestled with his own personal struggles. Others suggested that the accident had driven a wedge between them, leaving them emotionally distant from one another, and if that wasn't enough, dealing with something so deeply personal under the watchful eyes of the public only made things harder. When you live life in front of an audience, every little moment becomes a topic of discussion. The rumors about their marriage became impossible to ignore. People wanted answers. Was their relationship as strong as it seemed, or was it secretly falling apart behind closed doors? Despite all the speculation, Jane refused to let the rumors dictate her actions. She didn't run to tabloids to clear the air or fuel the drama with emotional statements. Instead, she did what she had always done. She focused on her family no matter what was going on behind the scenes. She showed up for Atsley when it truly mattered. She proved that regardless of what outsiders thought, her priority was always the people she loved. Still, even with Jane's quiet resilience, the questions didn't stop. Was their marriage truly unshakable, or was it struggling under the weight of everything they had been through? The public watched and wondered, was this just another challenge the Kilchers would overcome, or was this the beginning of a deeper rift that couldn't be repaired? The entire experience was an emotional whirlwind, especially for someone like Atsley, who had built his identity around being strong, independent, and always in control. He wasn't just recovering from a devastating fall, he was grappling with a fundamental shift in who he was. The accident had forced him into a reality where he could no longer rely solely on his own strength and resilience. For the first time, he had to lean on Jane in a way he never had before, and that wasn't easy for him. Atsley had always been the wild, adventurous spirit of the family, the one who pushed boundaries, took risks, and lived life on his own terms. Jane, on the other hand, had been the steady force, the rock that kept things grounded. Their dynamic had always worked because of that balance, but when the accident happened, everything changed. The roles they had always played in their marriage suddenly flipped. The man who had once been fiercely independent now had to depend on his wife for even the simplest things. That kind of role reversal isn't easy for anyone, and for Atsley it was an especially bitter pill to swallow. He had spent his entire life proving his toughness, and now he was in a position where he had no choice but to accept help. Jane, meanwhile, was carrying a heavy burden of her own. Not only was she dealing with the emotional weight of seeing her husband in such a vulnerable state, but she also found herself shouldering the responsibility of being his primary caretaker. It wasn't just about tending to his physical needs, it was about navigating the emotional complexities of their shifting relationship. Atsley, struggling to accept his new reality, often resisted the help he so clearly needed, and that resistance created tension between them. Jane had always been there for him, but now for the first time the strain of that support was beginning to take a toll, and if dealing with the emotional and physical challenges wasn't enough, there was another layer of pressure that made everything even harder. The public eye. Every step of Atsley's recovery, every challenge they faced as a couple was being played out in front of an audience. The cameras from Alaska, the last frontier, were always rolling, capturing moments of their lives that most people would normally process in private. On top of that, fans and media outlets were constantly watching, speculating, and commenting on their relationship, while the public support for the couple was overwhelmingly positive. The sheer intensity of the Attention left little room for them to navigate their struggles in peace with their marriage under constant scrutiny. Rumors inevitably started to spread. People wondered if the stress of Atsley's recovery had pushed them to their breaking point. Was their relationship as strong as it once was, or was it beginning to crumble under the weight of it all? While neither of them publicly admitted to any serious marital problems, it was hard to ignore the fact that the accident had introduced challenges they had never faced before. No relationship goes through such a dramatic shift without some level of strain, and for Atsley and Jane the pressure of healing both physically and emotionally became one of the biggest tests of their partnership. Ultimately, although their relationship faced significant challenges, both Jane and Atsley emerged from the experience stronger in ways only true hardship can forge. The obstacles they encountered during and following the accident were substantial testing their relationship in unforeseen manners. The separation of Atsley and Jane Kilcher did not occur suddenly. The journey toward their formal split was fraught with difficulties, some clear and others less apparent. Let's examine how these events transpired. Jane finally divorces Atsley. Rumors began to circulate and speculation arose regarding the reasons for their crumbling marriage. It's well known that living in the limelight often brings unwanted scrutiny. Yet the strain in the Kilcher marriage was palpable. There were murmurs of increasing separation, with reports indicating that Jane felt burdened by the relationship. However, the true breaking point arrived in 2019. At that juncture, both Atsley and Jane contended with more than the physical repercussions of his accident. Realizing they were no longer the individuals they were prior to the incident in 2023, Jane and Atsley Kilcher made the tough choice to publicly announce their divorce, which thrilled the disappointed fans and followers. After years of whispers and conjectures, they finally revealed their personal truth in a statement that was both sorrowful and enlightening. It wasn't an easy decision, but they agreed it was time to confront the issue directly. In the well-prepared statement, Jane was forthright about the heartbreak she was experiencing. She clarified that although the decision was mutual, it was not without significant emotional distress. Jane discussed the impact that years of personal and emotional challenges had on her and Atsley, and how they had drifted apart over time. What stood out in Jane's statement was the honesty with which she conveyed her feelings. She didn't sugarcoat anything and recognized the pain, disappointment, and sadness accompanying the conclusion of their marriage. Fans who had closely followed their journey on Alaska: The Last Frontier could feel the authenticity in her words. For his part, Atsley also shared a statement, but his tone was more measured. He recognized the separation but refrained from elaborating on the emotional side. His message focused less on conveying sorrow and more on acknowledging the need to move on. It was evident that while Atsley was not as expressive as Jane regarding personal struggles, he was still working through the end of the marriage in his own manner. Both made it clear that there was no resentment between them. It wasn't a problem-filled breakup. There were no public disputes or dramatic allegations. Instead, it appeared to be two individuals who had accepted that their love story had concluded. The choice to divorce, although sorrowful, appeared to stem from acknowledging that they had evolved in different ways and required space to individually heal. In the ensuing years, both Jane and Atsley seemed to rediscover their individual paths. Atsley remained part of the show, yet his personal life became more guarded, while Jane also distanced herself from the limelight, prioritizing her health and her children. It's evident that their formal separation was a distressing episode, but it also marked a realization for both that they needed to recover apart in their own time. Do you believe their divorce was the right choice, or is there more to their narrative than what they've disclosed? Jane's life after the divorce. Jane never idly waited for life to unfold itself. She is proactively embracing new challenges and adventures. One of her recent undertakings has involved plunging into the frigid waters of Bering Sea gold, and it's been quite the experience. If you're familiar with Bering Sea gold, you understand it's far from easy. This show elevates gold mining to an entirely new level where risks are substantial, the waters are icy, and each dive feels like a wager against nature. Yet for Jane, it's merely another phase in her quest to confront challenges directly. She has swapped the rugged life of homestead for the excitement of dredging boats, demonstrating once more that she's willing to get her hands dirty, or in this case completely wet. By joining the cast of Bering Sea gold, she traded farming tools for dredging gear and the rough mountains for the unpredictable waters of Nome, Alaska. It's an entirely new realm, and Jane has plunged in head first, both literally and figuratively. Her journey into gold dredging commenced in 2021 when her friend Emily Riedel, a seasoned captain on Bering Sea gold, required a trustworthy person to manage her dredge during her pregnancy. Jane, always seeking adventure, accepted the challenge. However, this was no ordinary day on the Kilcher homestead. The frigid waters of the Bering Sea are not to be taken lightly, nor is the pressure to uncover gold for Jane. It became an intense introduction to underwater mining, crew management, and going through one of the most danger-filled work environments on the planet. Initially, it was quite a steep learning experience. The equipment was daunting, the conditions harsh, and the crew dynamics occasionally strained. Yet if there's one thing we've learned about Jane over time, it's that she never shies away from a challenge. Gradually she found her balance, honed her dredging skills, gained the respect of her teammates, and infused her trademark determination into the job. Observing her adapt and flourish in such a severe setting is truly motivating. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.